I'm Dale Dupoy. I'm a resident field technician for the Peoria area, working on the CLAAS Combine.
I'm Nathan Johnson. I live in Hannah City, which is east or west of Peoria. Been here 6 years, resident field tech. Today we're going to go through a maintenance walk around on the Lexion 700 series combines.
Starting on the right hand front, everybody that's got one of these machines knows all about the rock trap. I recommend you clean the rock trap absolutely every day. It's a good way to prevent some material debris from rocks that fall into the rock trap that you're completely unaware of when you're harvesting. We're not going to open this one up, but get the rock trap cleaned out. You have your prep pans, your pull-out rubber prep or plastic prep pans inside of this door that also need to be pulled out at least once a season. If you have a down day, I'd recommend pulling them out and cleaning them off. That's all part of your prep floor and will create cleaner, better grain, the cleaner those pans are.
The other thing to do, I would say on a daily basis when you blow the machine off, is to reach underneath there and blow the top of that transmission off, because that gets a lot of heat, and if you're on the get a bunch of heat in there and it'll hold material, then that's a good way to start a fire and start melting harnesses, and it's something you won't know that's even happening until it's too late. So your two belts here, if you ever slug your machine, to me the most common failure of it, you slug your machine or your APS right there, that belt, you'll see it'll be burnt around the pulley. Sometimes a belt you won't have any cuts in it, but it'll have a glazed look to it. If it looks glazed at all, change it. Because if it's been slipped once, it's going to slip again, and the second time you might not be as lucky. Behind that's just your 2-speed. Check your oil levels in it. Make sure that on your bolts that lock your 2-speed, there's the little nylon bushings on them. I've had those wear out and even be gone, and that'll just let that pulley sit there and rock back and forth and give you a better chance you're going to shear them off, and give you a heck of a noise sometimes when you engage it.
On 2-speed, when you're doing your lubrication, make sure that the box is locked to the side of the machine. Some people are unclear on that, and they'll get a box overfilled by not locking it to the side of the machine, and then it'll blow out the vent and we'll get oil on the belt. So when you check your oil level, make sure your machine's on flat ground and that the box is locked to the side of the machine.
Then up above that, you have 2 belt tensioners. You kind of got to go in from the back to see. It's just the same red, tip-to-tip tensioners back there. I've found on them a lot, once you start to tighten them, take an air gun and try and blow some of the crap out from inside of that spring. But if you can blow them out before you start to adjust them, otherwise you'll start stripping that nut and then you'll make it impossible to do it.
On your drive for your elevator, your return elevator auger, if you just got another one of these plastic bushings right here, and if you're careful with it, you can get 3 rotations out of this particular one, the way it's designed. And you just want that chain to not be loose. It doesn't need to be stretched completely tight. It needs to have just a little bit of slack in it. It's fine. That chain is not an O-ring chain, so if you wanted to put a little chain lube on that chain, you could, to dress it up and give it a little lubrication. All right, the next thing we'd like to talk about, maintenance item, is both on the left and right hand side. We recommend it at least once a year. Pull the drive shaft out at both ends, pull it apart, lubricate the splines completely. Make sure there's no problem with the joints at this end. Make sure the U-joint's good and tight. You do want to get a good inspection of that U-joint. Make sure that's all how it's supposed to be.
On your cleaning fan, you want to take a look, and you can see more of the fan on this side. It's still not much, but you want to make sure that it's clean on the inside. You want to check for your fins not to be busted, and make sure the airflow it's not cut off from the front with debris, and if you had any leaks that oil would get on there from the transmission or something, and it'll put a bunch of dirt into it, because that's going to cut down a lot on your airflow and cause things to have a lot more issues with your cleaning system. Check your fan bearings. make sure when you're, loosen that belt tensioner, because it doesn't take much, and just kind of rock that fan and spin it. You want to make sure there's no heavy spot to it that you spin it and it just coasts to a stop, that it doesn't have one spot that's heavier than the other because there's a bunch of debris stuck in it.
I want to talk about the variators, which the other side you have some of the same things on variators. These have what we call the glide shoes on the Variator. This is our newer style Variator. The older style Variator will have 3 shoes instead of just having the 2 shoes that these Variators have. You want to look at those. You want to make sure there's not a substantial amount of wear on the face of this black plastic material. If there's anywhere there at all, I suggest changing those out. They're not complicated to change out. The book will give you some guidance on that.
Clean grain, it's the same thing. Anybody's been around combines, check your sprocket wear, your chain wear on your clean grain chain. Check your boot, depending on the amount of bushels you've had through it. Basically right where your cover goes on, the lip that goes up behind that, right behind that's the first spot it's going to get thin. So I usually take like a small hook bar or something and just kind of tap it. If you can put a dimple in that metal at all, you should replace it, because it's not going to last a whole lot longer. Clean grain drive chain, it's up here, you can't hardly see it, but you want to look up there, and there's your idlers. Make sure your bearings are good in that. Loosen your chain, make sure there's no play in it. Your sprockets, if they're starting to cup, replace them. On most of my machines that I inspect, I replace it every year. It spins pretty fast, and it's not that big of a pain in the butt, but it'll cause you a lot of problems if something happens.
It is also a chain that can be lubricated. It is not an O-ring. It is not an O-ring chain. It's plain chain. So you can add some lubrication to it if it's a good-looking chain, but it's just a little rusty or is a little stiff. It can be lubricated in a more traditional manner.
So your shaker bushings, you have your small shaker arms back here that connect your pans together, and then there's big, which you can't really see on this side. They're behind your clean grain elevator, but it's a rubber bushing that presses into the arm, and then you tighten the inner bushing down on the pan. So right where the 2 bushings, or the bushing goes to the rubber, they'll start to crack. And I do not know the book spec. I know what I go by. About 1/8 of an inch, if you can stick a screwdriver in about 1/8 of an inch, I replace them.
It's something we start seeing after 1,000 separator hours typically.
Yeah.
On 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old machines that have been through a lot of material, or older machines that sometimes with an older machine, it's an age thing. I mean, it is a rubber component, just like a belt or a tire. They don't last forever, even if your hours are low. So there's something to always look at.
Most of the time, if I see 1 or 2 of them going, I just replace them all. The main thing is when you put them back in, get your whole cleaning system in the middle, because it goes forward and back the same amount. So you want to get them in the middle before you tighten those back down. Otherwise, you're going to overstress that one way, and you'll break them back out by the end of the season at least, if not sooner.